What's going on, everybody? Boris here at the Ecology Design Studio, and today we're going to jump right in with a video about website development or web development. And we're going to take a look at REST. What that is representational state transfers. We want to have data on a database, query this database and receive a result set, and then display it on the web page. We do this because we want to have dynamic data, right? We want people to be able to come to our website, interact with it, enter data in one manner or another. Maybe they're editing a table, they're adding rows, they're deleting them. And we want to submit that change to the database, and then that change is reflected for other users or for the same user. So this is going to be a simple example, but let me start at the beginning. What we are seeing here is the new Arcology Designs website. And this is a web application. There's business logic, there's JavaScript, there's Java code running on the server. We're using Oracle WebLogic 12.1.2, I believe. We're using a good UI system, and I'm using a single page architecture. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but for now let me just give you a tour of the site. Right, we have the menu, which is toggable. Clicking on it and then clicking on it again hides it. There's no real reason, right? Because this is just empty space. Maybe we can, if this was a monetized website, we can put an ad here, and then that way the ad doesn't actually detract from the site. We can hide it and just recover it if we want to see the menu, and then when we uncover it, bam, it's right there. There's also a progress bar, because in a web application like this, I have a lot of options on the side here, and what I'm doing is preloading each and every single one of them before the user even begins interacting with the website. I don't want to dynamically load one at a time on click. To me, that detracts from the user experience. I would much rather load all of the content and the JavaScript up front once, and then have the user interact with the application normally, with some loading necessary or some wait necessary when you're submitting data to a database and things like that. Then have to, each time you click on an option, you see something else or there's a wait, right? So right now everything is available right away. So what is happening here? Let's take a look at maybe release notes. We have a how to use this site, and we see test 1. Unfortunately, there's not exactly a bug, but there's a behavior that happens that if on first load, let me refresh this. I can click on whatever and the menu stays is sticky to the side. But if I use this button even once, then every time I click away from the screen, it hides it, and then you have to click on it again. Anywho, you can see this change to test 2, right? If I click on how to use this site, it says test 1, and if I click on available features, it says test 2. What this means is the user does not have to scroll down. The whole idea behind this website is the user never has to scroll down to see anything. It is always up front and center, and we're nesting content within different tabs. So let's find one that has multiple. Okay, right here. So we have first, second, third, 1A, 1B, 1C. And here, if we go to first, we see the default that opens up is 1A. Second is 2A, and third is 3A. And then we go to 3B. 3B changes. So just imagine how much content you can pack into these tabs. Let's take a look at one that's a bit more fleshed out. So for example, getting data via RESTful calls from Microsoft SQL database. So we have a demo, how it works, implementation in code, and then for the demo we have jQuery tables, UI grid, and others custom. Right now only the jQuery tables works. As you can see, it says no data available, but we'll see in a second that there is in fact data. I'm using a Microsoft SQL database on Azure, on Microsoft's cloud platform. So I've switched tabs here, and now I'm looking at Microsoft Azure. I have an Arcology Design Studio test database. I ran into problems with this ads in my JavaScript file because I had a ads.js. and it flagged it and it blocked my website because it thought that was actually advertising JavaScript. So I had to change the name of that file and do some tricks to get around it. But what we need to do is add the IP here under firewall settings, otherwise it blocks it, right? And then we see this client IP address that tried to access it last time, and we can tell right here it tells you which one tries to access it, and it's not in these in this list right here. So let's take a look. Let's go to, and there it is. We're getting data now. As you can see, almost an immediate result, right? We enabled our database, we enabled the connection to our database, and now we're getting a stream of data. This is data that's in the Microsoft SQL database. We're querying it with Java using a RESTful call, getting back a result set. I'm converting that result set into a JSON object. We'll talk more about what a JSON object is and how to use it and how to parse it, either in a later video or later on. And then I'm displaying it in a jQuery data tables, right? So the interactivity of this table, the pagination, was not something that I created. I'm using an already built-in jQuery data tables format, and I'm implementing that on my personal website, on my personal design. And I'll show you how to use those resources and how to implement it yourself. I did have some problems getting the pagination to work, right? For me, it was backwards, I believe. For a long time, it was like 4, 3, 2, 1 for some reason. And then I had to tweak how I implemented it, how I looked at the numbers. Then the search functionality is pretty nice, right? We can look at test 002, and it's almost immediate, right? As you're typing, you don't have to press enter. As you're typing, it gives you the information you're looking for. This ID here, I created a GUID, which is a unique ID. Each and every time I insert a row into this database, it generates a unique identifier using these combinations of letters and numbers. We can choose how many entries we see. So I've chosen 50. It doesn't have quite as many rows, but right, the pagination goes away because there are no more pages. This is all of the data available on the website. So let's look at here. We can convert from base N to base N. So from any base to any other base. And this is a work in progress. Right now I have this snazzy little picker, right? So say for example you enter in an integer. Right now I don't have it's from base 10 to base N, right? And it doesn't quite work because it's not implemented. This is just the UI. I've been working primarily on the UI, and then the functionality will come at a later time. But right now you can choose an integer, say 10 in base 10, and then you select all these options, right? It already is in base 10, so we don't care. And we want to display results in base 2, base 3, base 5, and base 8. Right, and there are specific algorithms that we use to convert a number from a base to another base, such as long division and repeated subtraction and all that. So I'll show you some of those methods in separate videos. We'll have a tutorial on how to convert from a base to another base, and I could definitely use a refresher on those skills as well. And then we can clear all these results with this button here. It also needs to clear this, which at present it does not. MIPS32, this is an assembly language, is very good to understand how a computer does things, how it performs operations. And to me, assembly language was really a fascinating subject that I learned in school. Primarily it dealt with digitification, is that a word, of data into a binary format so that it's understandable by a computer. But it also dealt with instructions, machine instructions that are executed by a computer and how it links them, how it works with them. So for example, if we wanted to do something like, I'm just going to use the browser here, I'm going to type in I++. If we wanted to do something like I++, to us that seems like one operation, but to the computer those are actually 3 operations: load, increment and store, because we're loading the information from memory to a register, performing the increment operation by addition. We're basically doing an add-I. We can add an immediate, and then we're storing it back into memory for use, right? A fascinating topic, and we can get into it on different videos. That's why I'm so happy to be back, guys. I'm so happy to be back in the Ecology Design Studio, doing what I love to do, making tutorials, making videos, learning, and refreshing my knowledge on what I have previously learned, because these are all perishable skills, right? It's not like riding a bike. You need to be constantly staying on top of your knowledge, on your skills, so that they are fresh and available, right? I mean, I could do conversion from binary to any other base and so on and so forth, but it'll take me much longer than if I review it and stay fresh on it. That way I don't have to stay and think, well, how do I do this? How do I do long division? Was it the last bit that was the most significant digit, or the least significant digit, right? What is it? So that all needs to stay fresh. I do want to show you one quick thing. I'm using local storage to query the browser if this is a user's first access to the application. And if it is, then I want to query them for certain specific settings or preferences, right? Maybe they don't want a blue color, maybe they want red or green. And that's an easy thing to implement to give the user a more customized, personal experience with your site. And this is just an experiment. I'm sure there are better ways of doing this, but I'm using Chrome, and F12 opens my developer settings, and I can go under local storage, and right here we see a variable pop up. It's very small. It says visited before with a value of true. I can either set this to false, or I can just delete it. I can delete this value. And let's see what happens when I refresh my site. Boom, look at that. We have a pop-up come in, and it's basically, right now it's telling us something innocuous or useless, like archiving old messages, your inbox is getting full, right? This is just some default text that I pasted on there because why not, right, in the interest of time. But this would usually say something like, welcome to the Ecology Designs website. I see you're a first-time user. Please select your preferred theme, like a dark theme, a light theme, language. Maybe if I support internationalization, you can select English or Spanish or German or whatever, right? And then you would click yes, or you can just say accept defaults or save my preferences and so on, and you can close it out. And now when I refresh the site, it doesn't show up again, right? Because on our first visit, the variable is set to false. We're querying the browser, we're querying local storage, and we're saying, look in local storage, does this variable exist? If it does exist, is it false? If it's false, display this, this information. If it's true, then don't display it anymore. And until I clear my browser history and my local storage, it will always remain as true. There's different ways to do this. You know, we can use cookies, or we can store information on the server side, right? If we don't want to store the user settings locally, I suppose we could, of course, always store it on the server end. But I'm trying to do as much of the business logic on the client as possible to keep the user experience closer to home. And we'll talk a little bit more about why I'm going with this particular architectural decision in later videos. But now, enough about the UI. We've seen sort of a general idea of how everything works and what we want to accomplish, right? For the user interface, I'm looking at HTML and CSS, right? We have their logos and all these great things. Now let's take a look at the code behind the scenes. So I'm creating my connection string. I'm connecting to the database. I believe either we had a video that focuses on this, maybe we don't, but the point of this video is not to delve into any specific topic like connecting to a database, doing stored procedures, converting things to a JSON object. This is just to give you an overview of what functionality the website uses. The code is all available on my GitHub. Links in the description below, and you can take a look at it at your own leisure. But for now, you know, we're closing all the results that we're doing all these things, right? And I try to comment things out in a way that would be helpful. And here we have the RESTful call, Azure Test. If we go to Azure Test, we should see the JSON object itself displayed as a string. So let's go back here. Let's go back to welcome Azure test. So it's a welcome slash something, I think. There we go. Okay. What RESTful calls do is basically give us this object to work with, and I have it serialized into JSON, and now I can use it on my front end. I can parse it, I can select specific columns, and what I'm doing is I'm taking all of the data and putting it in jQuery tables. All right, but how I get this data is via this RESTful call. Let me go back to the IDE. I'm creating this, I'm mapping this request, and we'll talk more about, I'm using Spring 4. We'll talk more about what these annotations mean in later videos. I'm creating an application JSON, and basically this method returns a string of this object, which is then used on the front end. And we can take a look at the front end when we go to resources, JavaScript, and our app.js. We are creating, we have an AJAX call with the URL of welcome Azure test, which is how we get the string, the full object. We're creating our columns, right? We don't have column names in the table itself, and so we're creating it on this end. And then how jQuery does it in the background, they take the data and parse it and put it in the tables via some method. If I scroll all the way up, we can see the code for the local storage variable, right? You know, we're querying the type of storage. We're seeing if the variable exists, right? If it doesn't, we're getting this item, right? var visited before, local storage.get item visited before. And in the log, we're seeing, you know, what that is. So basically, instead of just showing you the code, let me show you what it actually looks like. Let's go back here. Let's open up our console, F12 console, and we see this is printed out, right? var visited before equals true. But let's go to application and local storage and delete that and go back to console. And let's refresh. So right now, var visited before equals null, right? On first visit, when that variable doesn't exist, we're querying the local storage saying, you know, is the variable there? Show me what's there in local storage. And it's no, because it's not false, it's not true, it just doesn't exist, right? And now when we click away, if we refresh again, it should say true. And there it is, because we visited it, and in the code, we see that we're setting this item in local storage to true. This video is getting a bit longer than intended, guys. I'm going to try to keep these videos short, quick, and to the point. This is basically an overview. We covered a lot of these concepts before, like Maven, for example. And what I'm doing here is putting everything that we learned previously together in one project that we can play around with it, and we can explore and use it as a platform for implementing additional features, right? So once we have a good architecture going, once we have a good build process going, then we can start having the real fun, right? Once RESTful works and all our resources are loading, and maybe we have some additional security, then we can just start actually adding content to the site, right? Once we have a proof of concept that our RESTful calls work and we can get data and we know how to display it on the main page like this, then we can just start making tables for different purposes. We can start adding, for example, insert, delete, or update functionalities, right? You can double click, edit the row, submit. You can do SMTP and send emails, notification emails saying, you know, the database was updated and these specific records were updated, right? We can have a lot of fun with the workflow and with the logic and functionality that's available on this site. So I'm going to have different videos for each and every component, right? For the client-side logic, for Spring MVC and Spring 4, for the RESTful calls, for database connectivity and best practices and security. What is a stored procedure? What is a database job, right? Putting in triggers and scheduling them, so we have a nightly job that maybe does some aggregation or deletes data, it clears the database, right? So every night we don't care about preserving the data, so we just every night we run a job that truncates all the tables and things like that, right? So we can have a lot of fun with this. We have all the resources here. I'll show you the the directory structure that I'm using for this specific application. Here we see all the pages and the modals. There's a lot of pages again, but if I go to index.jsp, it's just one page that is displayed at any one time. We're never refreshing or loading away, and I'm including these pages on the server, on the index.jsp directly. So they only exist, these JSPs are only partials, right? They're not a full page with a head and body declaration. These are just divs, right? Starting here. We have the div. When we go to maybe algorithms, bad choice, build automation tools. This whole thing, first, second, third, and 1A to 1B and all that, that is contained within a div that's then placed on the index.jsp, and then that way we don't have to recreate things or reload things. Anywho, I'm going to end the video here, guys. A lot of things that we covered today, very cursorily, right? Surface skim. We covered local storage, we covered REST, Spring MVC, accessing a database, displaying data in a table, user interface, progress bars, all the things that we're seeing we're going to cover independently. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on another Arcology Designs production.